And we're back once again, only on, it's Last Call. Last Call to the Alcohol, only on the lastcallpodcast.com. And join me here once again. He knows everything about college football. He was calling some of this stuff before it actually happened. And last week he broke down everything about some of the college hires, and even he was saying, can't get any crazier. Contraire, mon frere, it got crazy. We're gonna talk about that. I give you once again from Tailgate SEC Talk. I give you Will Thomas. Let's start off here with the search that we thought was never going to end. I mean, we were thinking, oh crap, this might not until January. We're not sure. They kept getting people, turning him down. Penn State finally has a football coach. It took them like what candidate 25, 24. But they finally got Matt Campbell is now the new head coach for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Let's start off here with a big question. Is he the right man for the job? If you were a Penn State fan, why would you like this hire?
Well, at this point, you like it because it's a hire, right? I mean, they were so far off the ledge where I had no idea what they were going to do. On signing day, they had two commitments to their recruiting class. Like, it was a total nightmare. And Matt Campbell is a guy that on both shows that we've talked about the coaching carousel, you and I, like, we've brought him up as why is this guy not getting talk? Should he be talked about? Like, this all of a sudden is one of the better hires I think that they could have made because he's turned Iowa State into I don't want to say a contender, but they've been a pretty legitimate Big 12 team. I mean, they were in the conference title game last year, and being in Ames, Iowa, and at Iowa State, that is not remotely the pinnacle of investment and alignment, and we're going to make this football program great. That's there at Penn State. Like they want to be great at football. So now you have a guy who's shown that he can build a program and have a team competing every now and then for conference championships and playoff spots in a place where college football is not supposed to be elite. And now he's at a place where the expectation is being elite. I think it works out really well for both sides.
Before we get more into that, let's ask the big question: why didn't they go to him in the first place? I mean, it was almost like they were, playing footsie with people that like. And look, no disrespect to Kalani Sitake of BYU, but he sort of knew he wasn't going to leave BYU, and yet they made an overtures to him. They were in negotiations. They were, it seems like they were waiting for the pie in the sky guys like Matt Rule or Kurt Signetti. Like, if I'm a booster, I'm going to ask, Pat Kraft, like, what the hell took you so goddamn long? Why couldn't you have hired this guy like right during the Lane Kiffin, fiasco?
I really think it's because when they fired Franklin, like that was less than a year after they were one drive away from going to the national championship game. So they knew that they had to, if you're going to fire Franklin, even though it's kind of something that fans were starting to talk about, like you had to make a splash. You couldn't fire a guy who had you in the semifinals last year and then just hire someone who's kind of ho hum, which is why you kind of saw them swing at Rule first and Signetti first. And then when those guys struck out, you go to Chesney, who's like sort of the group of five coach in this cycle. Like you wanted somebody who was getting buzz and who was going to be popular to really sort of make it seem like firing Franklin was worth it and getting rid of that kind of sort of sustained success, sustained relevance was going to be worth it. And Matt Campbell, despite what I know that you and I both think of him as a coach and how I think he will actually do there, he just wasn't going to be that name that got people excited if they hired him and he was their target day one. He just wasn't going to be that guy who got people fired up. So I think that that was a massive part of it for Pat Kraft was we've got to send a message right now. We've got to hit a home run, and it's got to be one of these big names that everybody's after. And even though Campbell now he's not someone that everybody was after, I think he's not that much worse of a hire than any of the other big name guys would have been.
So what is it about Campbell? Like right now, what is Matt Campbell walking into? Like, I know Penn State fans have these high expectations, but after seeing everything that has gone on, as you said, a recruiting class that was ranked like 150th out of
Hmm.
150 teams. Should there be lower expectations for next year? Like, yeah, look, they need to rebuild. James Franklin's going to raid this roster as soon as possible. There are no recruits coming in. The coach got, literally hired 2 days after signing day. So, I mean, should Penn State fans like look and go, Yeah, we need to give this guy time because Pat Kraft and the boosters literally just took a flaming torch to the Penn State football program, and Matt has to sort of build it now from the ground up.
Yeah, there has to be patience because I mean we are in an era where you've seen, teams turn it around immediately. And with all due respect though, like through the portal, a bunch of elite kids are not going to line up to go play in State College, Pennsylvania. They're just not. There are better destinations to go take your talent. So it's going to take more than just that 1 year of, pitching transfers and being able to try and hit that lottery with all those players. It's going to take more time than that. Because at Penn State, I do think that they're going to primarily be built through high school. And they'll be one of those schools that is going to emphasize using the portal just as a supplemental tool to fill in the gaps that you couldn't quite get, through high school recruiting. So with that obviously means it's going to take time because that Penn State roster was still very talented this year. I mean, you saw it. They almost beat Indiana. Like all those players were still there. So when they got up, they were up. But with the roster retention and with how little recruits they currently have and how many good guys are already signed elsewhere, it's going to be really hard to put together a roster that talented again next year. So there does have to be that patience of like the bottom just fell out of our team this past year. We're losing a lot of guys. We don't have a lot of great talent coming in. We're going back to the foundation here, right? We've got to build this back up, and we're in an era where the portal is effective. But at Penn State, I just don't think they're a destination where you'll see a quarterback, a receiver, an edge rusher, two tackles, a running back. I don't think that they're going to be able to go out and grab elite guys at all those positions. You can get some of them this year, but you really have to focus on rebuilding from high school to get Penn State back up to how they were successful in for the past decade, really.
All right, so you're Matt Campbell. Who do you target for transfers from Iowa State? Who is more likely to follow him over to Penn State? I mean, there's some players you probably go, yeah, they'll definitely do it, and others you go, no, they're hometown kids, they're going to stay. So realistically, who could follow Campbell over to Penn State that you would like if you were a Penn State booster?
I mean, I think you just start with Rocco Becht, right? Can you bring his quarterback over? He's just a junior, so he does have a year left if he wants it. Just to kind of have a known commodity at quarterback. Right now that Aller's going to be gone, you can do something with Becht and the guy who Campbell obviously already has that foundation with that trust with. He knows what to do with. And then I mean Carson Hansen also, just their running back. He's got 950 yards on the season, 5.1 yards per carry. Like if you bring Becht and Hansen over from Iowa State. I mean, Iowa's offense, it wasn't, this exceptional unit, but it was a solid enough, squad at scoring points where you can bring those two guys as sort of your playmakers and then go elsewhere, whether it's in-house, you can get like one or two receivers from the portal who maybe won't be flash names to be good enough to where you can kind of have an offense that Campbell knows, that he trusts, and that you can sort of just have the faith in that they'll score enough points where we'll win the games that we should, and maybe we can catch somebody on a bad day and pull an upset one time.
Here's a quarterback that, and I don't know if Penn State has a chance of getting him, but there's a kid from Harvard who right now everybody is buzzing
Mm.
about. They're talking about, hey, Jaden Craig. This is the guy to watch for. Jaden Craig. He's in the new transfer portal. Is that feasible if you're Penn State? If you're Matt Campbell, you're looking for a quarterback. Beck might not come. You want somebody. You're probably not getting the big super kids like a Drew Mestermaker, Lenora Sellers if he declares. Is Craig a guy that you could target and go, all right, that is our next Penn State quarterback?
I think so. We're going to be coming from Harvard. That's not a massive jump, at least culturally, to go to Penn State. Because I'm not sure that you'll get, many quarterbacks from down south who are transferring up to come to State College. So I do think that Craig is probably that guy if either Campbell doesn't want to bring Rocco with him or if Rocco doesn't want to come. You can definitely go after Craig and sort of get this up and coming guy to sort of bridge the gap. Can you recruit a quarterback out of high school, have him sit behind Craig next year, and just sort of start that process of developing your quarterbacks? Because Craig is definitely a talented guy. And all the buzz around him going in the portal right now is for a reason. Like he's going to be a good contributor at wherever he goes. So he could be a very good fit at Penn State.
Let's get back to Campbell for a second. What makes him a good coach? I know like everybody I talked to said he's one of the best coaches in terms of pure getting the most out of a talent, in terms of winning with limited resources. But I guess, when in the era now where, hey, we want offensive minds, or we want defense, we want defensive guys who know offensive minds. What is it about Campbell that, people who are in the know say he is a good coach and he can succeed here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just knowing that, what he's been able to do at Iowa State, given those resources. Like you would imagine that being at a place like Penn State, who was willing to invest, who has already seen, playoff berths, who has been sniffing national champions, like that he can build a program from effectively nothing into a conference contender in Iowa State. So what can you do at a program like Penn State, right, where there's already is that level of investment that based on level of talent? Like, can you take them up to another level? Because I mean, in game, I think he's very good. And Iowa State this year, they've won a game where they've scored 16 points and a game where they scored 39. Like he can kind of play sort of both ways to where he has his team prepared enough and focused enough, confident enough to where it doesn't really matter how the game is going, they're going to be comfortable. And they're not going to get thrown off their rhythm because maybe the offense isn't the one having the good day as the defense or vice versa. So I think just being able to prepare your guys in a sense where no matter how the game script is going, you're comfortable and you're still able to execute and get done what needs to get done. That's a very good quality to have that really not many coaches do have. So being able to bring that to a Penn State team that we've seen, just like fall short in some of these bigger games recently, can he fix that with a confidence demeanor that he can put over the whole team? I think that's kind of what separates him from other coaches in my mind.
Here's the fascinating part about Campbell also. And I'm guessing there was a lot of push from the Penn State people, so he agreed to it. But Terry Smith will be also on the staff. I'm guessing he'll
Mhm.
be assistant head coach, cornerbacks coach again for Penn State. The players loved him, fans loved him, so the boosters basically said, "Yep, he's going to stay with our staff. He's part of us here." If you're Matt Campbell, how does that work? Where, yeah, Franklin's gone, but Smith is still there. He's part of the old guard. If you're trying to change a culture, change things, how does this work with the guy who, oh, he was the head coach. We didn't want to promote him, but we didn't want to fire him, so he's still around. Like that is weird in a lot of cases.
It can be. It's not quite as weird as James Franklin hiring Brent Pry back at DC, but it's definitely a similar vibe. Like I don't think it'll be a problem, right? Because if Terry Smith was the kind of guy where that'd be an issue, where it'd be sort of a pride thing, where like, dude, I was the interim head coach. You can't just come and change my ways because now they put the permanent tag on you. If that's how he was, I don't think you'd have this much of an endorsement from everybody around him. Like I'm sure that Terry Smith is going to be fully bought into Matt Campbell. He'll be bought into whatever changes he wants to bring. So I don't really foresee that being an issue, actually. It's definitely possible, like you give the context based on who was in the room that maybe it could have been. But based on what we know about the guys in that Penn State building, I don't really see that being a problem for him.
All right, is the bleeding stopped? I mean, do you expect a lot of kids now to transfer to Penn State, or do you think that Matt Campbell arriving sort of gets people to go, all right, we're staying. We're not going to just, there won't be like a mass, exodus to Virginia Tech where James Franklin's probably been sending emails, making calls, and, third party sort of tampering, even though there's no tampering, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But is he the guy to basically get to convince guys like LeVar Arrington Jr., like, Amari Campbell, hey, stay here. We're going to build something, you will not regret it.
Yeah, I mean, before it came out that State was targeting Campbell, I thought that roster was going to look like a high school team next year. And I think they'll still lose, some of their more important guys, just because I don't believe that State College is really this premier destination for players where they want to be for all 4 years. Obviously, that doesn't apply to everybody, but I think they'll have a harder time retaining talent than some of the other bigger schools in the SEC, even some more in the Big Ten. But I do think that bringing Campbell in will at least save the doomsday scenario, right? Where you just hire this random guy who nobody of really any stature as a player or even as a coach wants to be around. They avoided that hiring Campbell because, the college football world knows and has respect for what Matt Campbell can do as a coach. So there's no doomsday scenario in my mind where, like everybody leaves and the roster is unrecognizable next year. But I just think because of the nature of coaching turnover Penn State is not, at least not this year, one of the top teams in the Big Ten. They're in a region where it's a little harder to get elite talent consistently. You'll still see some turnover, but it won't be a doomsday scenario like honestly it felt like it was going to be up until just a few days ago.
Who does Matt Campbell need to keep? In your estimation, like if there's like let's say four or five guys who could transfer out, but he should try to keep at all costs. Who are the guys that he needs to go to and go, look, have faith in me. I've gotten guys to the NFL. They've been first round draft picks. They're starting in the NFL. Stay here and I'll get you to that level.
It's the thing with Penn State's roster is that even coming into this year, it was really, really old. Drew Aller was a senior. Both Allen and Singleton at running back were seniors. Like he's almost walking into a school that just, regardless of whether or not they fired Franklin or not, it was a lot of players who were leaving. Like a bunch of their top tacklers, DeLuca, Wheatley, they're all seniors. So you really just kind of have to look at the youth that honestly nobody's really going to know about yet because it's guys who weren't really playing. I'd imagine he wants to hold on to Grunkemeyer just because, at least just to keep him in the room, as a guy who's been at Penn State for, just the year or two of his career for a familiar face. But really, it's going to be about fully building this roster up with a bunch of guys that people aren't familiar with. There is so much, senior reliance on this roster on both offense and defense to where, regardless of whether it was a new coach or still Franklin, it was going to be a lot of new coming into next year. So I think really the only one you can point to right now is Grunkemeyer because he can be either your quarterback next year based on how you play in the portal, or he can just be a guy who can leave depth in the room as someone who can play quarterback for Penn State. But really, it's going to be a lot of high school recruiting and identifying who on that roster he thinks can be a contributor, maybe not even next year, but in 2 years.
His contract, 8 years, guaranteed 70.5 million. There's even 1 million annual retention bonus. Uh, I'm looking here. It's usually like he's getting paid around 8 million to start to 9 million. It sounds like they're investing. So if you're Matt Campbell, is this like his final destination? Do you see him jump? Because that's always been one of the concerns. Like NFL teams have sniffed around. Like Jerry Jones at one point was sniffing around, going, "Hey, we might have Matt Campbell as our head coach."
Mm-hmm.
So if he does well, let's say the next 2 years, if he gets him to where let's say Indiana is, do you see him bolting? Do you see him turning this into an NFL career?
I think he could. And I also, not that I think, Lanning or Ryan Day or Signetti are on their way out anytime soon, but if for whatever reason one of those jobs opens and they want him, I realistically see somebody jumping from Penn State to Ohio State or to Oregon. So, I mean, if he has no success, the NFL calling obviously would be the biggest threat because I don't see those other Big Ten jobs opening up really. But, if for whatever reason Ryan Day steps down and Ohio State opens up and Campbell just won 11 games with Penn State, like you could see that jump happen even. So I do think Campbell will have a next step. I think it'll be in, 5 or 6 years because if he does turn it around to where they're a contender, it will take that time like we talked about. But I do think it's very possible where this is not his final stop. And, in 5 or 6 years, we see him either moving up in college football or maybe taking that next jump to the NFL.
Well, we go from one guy who is an accomplished head coach under the radar, but and landed a big job to another guy who everybody was saying hey, this guy is the next big hot assistant coach. He's going to land someplace great, and then it's a good but not great job. We're talking Brian Hartline at University of South Florida. Here's the first thing that comes to my mind is this sort of for him like a step down? And I don't mean any disrespect to South Florida, but there are people talking about, hey, Brian Hartline is going to Penn State. Hey, Brian Hartline might go down to Auburn. Hey, Hartline might go to even Virginia Tech. Like he was like the creme de la creme of assistant coaches. This is a guy who every NFL wide receiver right now, from Ohio State, this guy developed and recruited. So why South Florida? Why, I guess, is that job that Brian Hartline decided to take? Is it, in your mind, do you think, is it just he needs a head coaching job, or did he maybe, dare I say, panic a bit too much?
I don't really know if I have a confident answer to that, right? Because I don't have any insider info on how hard was Penn State going after him? How hard was Auburn going after him? So I don't know, if those two schools, if they even wanted to hire him because he's a coordinator. But I do think that going from, a coordinator from coordinator to a head coach, really however small the school is who's the head coach, as long as it's, an FBS program, is not a step down. Because coordinator to head coach, in my mind, is always a promotion, especially for a guy like Hartline, who, like you talked about, is probably the best developer of wide receivers that we've seen in the modern era. And he's an unbelievable recruiter at skill positions. So you get to go to a place like USF, which is right there in Tampa, right in Florida, where you have all of these, elite receivers just growing out of the grass. I think he's going to do an incredible job of talent acquisition there at USF. And we've seen coordinators to head coaches. That's kind of been the formula for who the elite coaches are now. So do I think if he does turn into an elite coach, is it at USF? Probably not. You'll see him develop and then move up again if that's his trajectory. But I really like this hire a lot because he's going to a talent-rich area, and his biggest strength has been talent acquisition and development. So I think he can have USF really clicking with their skill players, in just 2 or 3 years.
It's rare because he's going also to a program where it's not bad. Like this isn't some team
Mm.
like, an Oregon State or an Akron where it's like, oh God, you're just gonna this team is bad. Good luck to you. And they pat you on the back and like, oh crap. His career died. He's going, as I said, South Florida is pretty good. I mean, Alex Golesh turned that program around and got them into a at one point top 25 team.
Hmm.
What should we expect from them next year? I mean, are they a team that we could still see do well in the American Alliance Conference? Is this a team that we look at and go, hey, they might be even win the whole thing now that there's been so much turnover with other teams?
I think you could. The biggest question, though, is what does Alex Golesh bring with him? Because I do believe that Byron Brown, he's listed as a senior. I think he has another year. Like I believe he has one more season of football left to play if he wants it. So could that be at USF? Could he follow Goalish to Auburn? Could it be somewhere else? I don't know. There's a ton of talent at receiver at USF. That's not seniors at Keyshawn Singleton, Kroger, Rubin, Nimrod. Like there are all these good players that are already in the building. Do they follow Goalish to Auburn? Do they just go somewhere else because Goalish is gone? Or is Hartline able to walk in and really retain that talent because of his reputation? I mean, if you're a receiver, I don't really know why you would leave. Because even though you're at USF, like NFL eyes will be on USF. And if you're the caliber of player who, would do good in the SEC or the Big Ten, then you're the caliber of guy who can go for like 1,500 yards in the American. So you can produce more than you could possibly produce anywhere else with Hardline in the American. And sure, it's not, you don't get to be prime time on ABC. If you do make the playoff, you'll get probably beat by the 5 seed. But as a individual player, there won't be a better place for you as a receiver, maybe even a running back, maybe even a quarterback, than there will be with Heartland at USF. So that can be his pitch to keep this team together. And if the core of the team does stay together, USF will be once again next year one of the most talented teams roster-wise in the American. And assuming that Heartline, isn't a total bust as a head coach, they should be good to compete in the American again next year.
How much do you think it'll help him with retain players and everything? Because let's face it, he's an accomplished NFL wide receiver. He played 7 years in the NFL. He actually had two 1,000 yard wide, receiving, seasons. He is a guy who, hey, he was pretty damn good. So when you add that to the offense coordinator position, when you add that to the wide receivers position coach he's had success at, could he retain almost everybody from Florida State, or sorry, South Florida, because he can look and go, I know what you're going through. I've been in your shoes. I know where you want to be. I can make it happen because I've been to the NFL and I've been to the big, dance with Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. Like, what better situation is there as a receiver than just playing for Brian Hartline? All those guys. I mentioned that Nimrod's actually a senior, so he can't come back. But Keyshawn Singleton, he's just a junior. Jeremiah Coger, he's a freshman, but he was their second leading receiver this year. Like, that room is full of talented guys who we saw put up good numbers against teams like Florida and like Miami. Like they've already put up good numbers against power teams. So then you bring Hartline in, and you're looking at your American schedule next year. I don't know if USF plays any power teams next year. I can look at that later. Um, but yeah, there's really no better place to be for any receiver than with Brian Hartline, especially in a conference like the American, which even though it's not a power conference, like there are eyes on the American all the time. Like that fifth playoff spot is de facto reserved for the American team. So you still get a bunch of eyes on you. You're not a power conference. You're not going to get college game day there or anything, but you're going to have a lot of eyes. You're going to be in an offense that is going to be successful with Hartline running the show. It's a really good spot for any receiver.
Here's the one drawback for South Florida. You hire Brian Hartline, he's going to do a great job. Then what? Because if he does well, and let's say Ryan Day decides to step down in the next couple of years, he just goes, I'm tired of you goddamn, Buckeye fans. You're a pain in the ass. All you do is bitch. I'm out of here. Double finger salute. I'm walking out the door. They're gonna call Brian Hartline if he has any success and go, hey,
Mm.
back to the promised land. We want one of the kids, one of our guys, a Buckeye legend to come back and be the head coach of the Buckeyes. Or even forget about that far back. Florida State's not doing too well. Mike Norvell barely survived. If he has a good year, is Brian Hartline a one and done? I mean, do you see Florida State looking at him going, hey, you proved you could be actually a good head coach. We'd love to
Yeah, they
have you
definitely
at Florida State.
they definitely could. I mean, yeah, that's kind of the harsh reality for these non-power jobs and even some power jobs, honestly. But like they're stepping stone jobs, and now at this point, truthfully, stepping stone programs for the best players and best coaches to audition for the bigger schools. And if they have success in 1 or 2 years, they're probably gone. So if you're USF, you have to look at this right now and be like, okay, we got Hartline. We have a guy who other schools have interest in, and if all goes to plan, they're going to take him from us before 2030. But what can we do over the next 800 days to make the most of this opportunity and be the best team that we can in these 2 or 3 seasons? That's kind of how you have to think about it because obviously they won't admit it publicly, like, USF's athletic department. They won't say, yeah, we know he's going to move on for us in 2 or 3 years, but they know that. Like, they know the reality of the sport at this point. So you have to look at it through the lens of we have 900 to 1,000 days right now. How can we be better every single day and make this program? Can we get to a playoff? Can we win a playoff game? What can we do with Heartline right now to make this the best 3 years in the history of the program? That's kind of how I have to look at it because if he has success, I think you're totally right. He will definitely get a promotion to a power job, and I think it will happen decently soon.
That leads us to the next coach. That is Jimmy Lake. Quickly hopped from job to job. Now he's at Iowa State. He last time we saw him, he was at Washington State. This feels like basically like a hire out of left field. I didn't have this on my bingo card. I thought they were going to stick with somebody more Midwestern. I thought they were going to try to maybe even promote an assistant. Instead, they went and got, I guess, a young, former assistant coach now head coach of Iowa State. Why was this the hire? Why did Iowa State go for a guy from the Pac-12 of all places?
I mean, frankly, I'm not sure they had many other options, right? Because of how late Campbell was hired at Penn State, like everybody was kind of off the board. So you look at a guy like Jimmy Rogers, who he has a 33-9 overall record, but he was 6-6 this year at Wazoo, and the rest of that came at South Dakota State, where he played actually. But to Rogers' credit, this year with Washington State, he had them very close on the road at Ole Miss, who is a playoff team, and at Virginia, who was one bad throw away from being a playoff team. They don't really have a great win. They have a few iffy losses, but you've seen the potential with Jimmy Rogers of like he can get his team up for these big games, and they can compete. And now being at Iowa State, he's at a program that, the Pac-2 teams, whether it's Wazoo or Oregon State, like they're kind of dead in the water. I don't really know what they do long term here. So now you're at a program like Iowa State, a program that really Matt Campbell built for him to now take over. Can he sustain some of that success to where you can win the games in the Big 12 you're supposed to? And when you get your shot at BYU, when you get your shot at Texas Tech, at least next year, can you compete? Can you show progress or can you just show a proof of concept where like we can take down these guys and compete in this wide open conference? So, I mean, he's definitely not a super big time hire right now because his only year in Division I football was 6-6 with Wazoo this past year. But frankly, I just don't know how many more choices that they had given how late Campbell was hired by Penn State.
Jimmy Rogers is a defensive coach, and I know you talked in the past about, you would prefer, especially in the NFL, hey, you prefer having offensive-minded coaches because if the OC leaves, they can still step in, call the plays, they know the offense. Would this be a problem for Iowa State? Because as you said, they haven't had to hire a coach for a long time. Campbell was there for almost a decade plus. So now that you went out and you guys said I get it. You were scraping the bottom of a barrel. There wasn't much, and you had to literally pivot, within minutes. Do you worry though that he might not be able to get, especially in the Big 12, which is all about the offense? Is this a guy that you look and go, yeah, we have faith he's going to keep, Iowa State to be an offensive sort of, at least up with the Joneses of the TCUs, the Arizona States, the Baylors, or is this one of those hires you go, this could be ugly if he doesn't bring in a good OC?
Yeah, you brought it up. That's really my biggest gripe is the culture clash between what Rogers wants to bring and what the Big 12 is could not be more different. So that's sort of the question now. Like we've seen power coaches fail because they're not willing to delegate or adapt to what the situation needs. You saw this with Billy Napier in Florida. He would not hire an OC. He kept calling the plays. It got him fired. If Rogers is willing to be the CEO of the team and just, hire a good OC and really just let him go. Hire a guy that you trust and just let him handle the offense. I was to keep your eye on it. You're the head coach of the team, but you've got to be willing to let somebody who knows how to run offense in the Big 12, or at least knows what it's supposed to be, do it. Because, you can still win as a defensive coach. But if you have a bad first year and all of your wins are, 20-17 as opposed to 42-35, even though a win is a win, like you won't have as much grace from the fan base because it's boring to watch, which is kind of the reality of the sport right now, especially the Big 12. So he has to be, first off, able, the program does, to hire a good OC. Then he has to be willing to just kind of let them go and have really full control of the offense.
When we talked earlier about Campbell, he has 17 million to spend on his coaching staff. Can Iowa State come even close to that? Even if it's like, yeah, we can't give you 17, but we'll give you like 10 or 12. It's something where he can actually go out and get assistant coaches, or again, is this going to be like, all right, well, what's available at Dollar Tree store for coaches?
I do think at least to start, it will kind of be that hiring on a budget. Because I would say their commitment is, it's fine enough to be a relevant team. It's not where it needs to be a, yearly contender. So I think he's going to have to come in and just sort of deal with, you know, the dollar store stuff until he can prove like this is going to work. I just need, you know, a few more dollars every year. I just need a little bit more investment and we can take to the next step to where I'm getting us to Arlington and I'm getting us in the playoff. So he's going to have to start off with some projects, right? And he's going to have to do an incredible job for the first 2 or 3 years with, what the cards that he's dealt to find a way to win the pot. And if he's able to do that, then you'll probably start to see some more investment because even though it is Iowa State, who's not a perennial winner, like Matt Campbell showed them success. So they know that it can happen at the school if they have the right guy in charge. And, every school now, they all understand the state of the sport. If there is potential to win, they're going to be able to find the money. I truly do believe that. So he needs to be able to find a way with what he's dealt at first to just put together progress. Can you stack, 2 or 3 wins more to your win total year over year to show that proof of concept? And then you'll see the boosters and the administration kind of come back in and be like, all right, we're ready to go get you a 5-star quarterback. We're ready to get you this offensive coordinator that you've been saying that you need. Like you just need to show that proof of concept before I believe that money comes in at Iowa State.
Well, if there is one guy who we always say there's no place like home. This guy here, he's going back home. That's right. The newest Kansas State football coach after Chris Kleiman retired, which was a bit surprising for a lot of us here. Former, K-State quarterback and a guy who's dear to everybody's hearts, Collin Klein, the Texas A&M offense coordinator, is now the new head coach for Kansas State. I don't love it as much as Campbell or Lane Kiffin or John Summerall, but I love his hire for what it is. I mean, it's a guy who knows the state, knows, literally the school, has, a name. I don't want to use the word home run, but is this a home run hire basically for Kansas State?
I think it's really, really good. Yeah, I mean, always love former players going back to coach their teams that they played at. And I mean, with Klein, he's a Broyles Award semifinalist this year as an offensive coordinator, and he has shown you at A&M how well he can utilize speed out wide with what Concepcion and Craver are doing this year, and he's able to maximize the potential of a mobile quarterback, like we see with Marcel Reed. And Kansas State, they won't be bringing in blue chippers, consistently at least to start under Klein, but you can get athletes there. Like they have athletes there right now. They have Avery Johnson, who might not be a very good passer, but he's fast. You had Dylan Edwards, who had a rough year for whatever reason, and you have good enough receivers. Like there's enough of a talent profile at Kansas State where at least to start in the Big 12, you can be pretty good on offense, if not very good. So I really like this because obviously he's very good X's and O's as an OC, and now you just have a guy who has incredible ties to the program. And having a guy like Klein come back to Kansas State, that's where you can almost get immediate, financial help. Because boosters will see that. They'll remember what Collin Klein did for the program and be like, we can get behind this guy right now. We can get him that receiver that he wants. We'll get him a quarterback that he wants. So I think having a familiar face like Klein will get you more of an immediate buy-in from the people with the money. And I trust Klein enough with what he's done at A&M to really kind of have that offense, if the pieces are in place, up and running pretty fast.
I remember beginning of the year we talked about how Kansas State should be a sleeper team to win the whole thing. But hey, that last year they were 9-5. Hey, they had the pieces. The quarterback came back. Hey, you know, Jace Brown is a stud. This is the guy they're going to get, and they just fell apart. So if you're Klein, how much of the personnel do you keep around? Like, what players do you go to and go, hey, I want you to stay. I can make something out of you. Hey, we're going to do big things next year because I will make sure that you are going to be in the possession to do big things.
Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, a big time one would be if you can get Dylan Edwards' number and find a way to convince him to come back. Because he had a bad year. And whether it was just injuries or whether there were some things off the field, it wasn't very good. But if you can pitch to him like, look, I'm coming in now. We have a new situation. I'm an offensive guy. I will utilize you because of how talented you are. That would be massive. And I talked about Avery Johnson. I think it's probably a good idea to move on from him because he's really good. He's really mobile. He's a nightmare with his legs. He had less than a 60% completion rate this year. I don't think he's the guy that Klein can really do his best with. So if you have that initial investment, like I think he might, can you go get him a good quarterback in the portal, or maybe it's a guy out of high school? Can you find a way to get Dylan Edwards back, or if not, can you just hold on to Joe Jackson, who was the leading rusher this year? He's only a sophomore. Like there are pieces on that offense, and even Jace Brown, right? He's just a junior. If you're able to get him back, that's a massive step. Like there is enough talent already in the room, in the building, I should say, to where you can have that offense up and running really, really fast if you're able to retain those players. And also with the portal, can you supplement one extra receiver? Or if you don't keep one of your running back, can you get an extra running back? There's a lot of potential with the state roster already, and having a former player back in the building with potential investment, it can be a lot easier to keep those guys than it would be.
I gotta ask because I know everybody's right now over down in Kansas State. They're all saying the same thing. Oh yes, no, it was mutual. Climate retire. We didn't know about it. The athletic director was crying. What have you heard? Was he sort of like not pushed out, but sort of gently nudged out the door? Was this something that they had been planning behind the scenes, or was this one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, he retired. We didn't know about it, and we just pivoted to Collin Klein right away.
I would definitely imagine that there was some degree of a mutual, like, let's get this over with, right? Because you were 6-6 this year. The whole thing felt kind of stale. And obviously, Kleiman was very important to that program. And I do believe, I totally trust that the emotions within that program were genuine. But I also believe that both are true to where they were sad that it ended, but they kind of agreed that it had to end and they had to go a different direction. So I do believe that both are true to where it's incredibly emotional. Nobody really wanted him to leave, but they were ready for him to leave, if that makes sense.
Does it now? Here's the big question going forward with Klein and Kleineman. With as you said, when Kleiman took the job, Chris Kleiman, he built the ground. He built it up from almost nothing. It was in a bad spot. We forget that, but Kansas State, going in there, we were like, oh crap, this is gonna be, it's not gonna be good. The previous year, it was 5-7, 3-6. Bill Snyder come back the second time around, and he was retiring, and people are like, yeah, we're sad you're retiring. We're sad you're retiring. Really, not really. So I give him credit. He took over from a legend, which is never easy, and he built Kansas State back up. If you're Collin Klein, do you worry that there's now going to be people in Kansas State go, he's back? The guy who almost got us to the national championship is back. We love him. Look what we did, Texas A&M. Look what we have here. Dare I say, we'll win the Big 12 next year. If Matt Campbell is like telling people, hey, we need to lower expectations, and people understand it's a rebuild job. If Brian Hartline's looking at his job, going, yeah, hey, we could take right off if we keep the right pieces. If you're Colin Klein, what are you telling the fan base in terms of like, this isn't, a teardown job, but yeah, I still need work. We can't expect me to compete for the Big 12 title next year.
Truthfully, I think that he can. And I do think
Really?
that that's probably the message that he should send, right? Just because of how open the conference is. Now, look, that is a very dangerous game, to your point, because if he comes in with these expectations, like he's saying, like, yeah, we're going to do it this year. Like, we're going to be back on the map. We're going to be ranked. We're going to be in the playoff talk this year. If it doesn't pan out, he won't lose the goodwill, but people will probably start thinking, like, okay, maybe this wasn't the home run that we thought it was. But I mean, with his pedigree, and it really comes down to if he can retain the roster and what he adds in the portal. Like, we'll know in the spring how realistic their chances are. So I think he can definitely pitch it as maybe he shouldn't say, we're back right now, but he can definitely say, like, we're going to have this program clicking in a way that you haven't seen in a few years right now. Like, he can at least pitch improvement confidently, which I do believe he'll be able to do quickly. And in the Big 12, it's so open. I know that we both know that. So really anybody can win it any year if the pieces are right. So you do have to find a way to thread that needle of managing your expectations, but also, exuding that confidence and the trust that, I'm the guy to get this done because he needs to share that too in order to get that help from the boosters and from the administration. So you have to thread that needle of, yes, we're confident, we're going to turn this around, but also like, every other school is also getting all this money for players. Like you have to manage those expectations while also being confident in what you can do.
BYU is investing a lot of money into their program. Texas
Mhm.
Tech, oh, we know they got tons
Yeah.
of money. They're like the drunk, like sorority girl got daddy's black Amex card is going nuts, or the drunk frat boy who got mom's black Amex card is going nuts. If you're Colin Klein and you're Kansas State, I mean, can you compete with that? I mean, because he's looking around and all of a sudden, like, oh crap, Texas Tech, they're spending big money. BYU, yeah, they're spending big money. Even, to an extent, Colorado, they will spend big money. Maybe not well, but they will spend big money. So if you're, can Colin Klein get Kansas State to open up a checkbook and start getting, enough money to compete for at least with BYU, forget Texas Tech, but at least BYU for funds?
I think he probably could. Obviously, the power of crumble cookies is definitely powering BYU to places that we haven't seen before. So it's definitely going to be hard to match that financial, commitment like those big schools, like you said. The question is, what do you do with it? And is Colin Klein the guy who can take, a few less $1 million than what BYU is doing, but have a better product? And that's, obviously I'm going to tell you what I'm saying right now is the importance of coaching, which I don't need to explain to anybody. But that money, to your point, I don't think it's ever going to be the same as Tech or BYU or even Colorado, but it's how you use it. Are you able to make the right decisions to where, sure, we can spend all this money on this running back. Is he the right player for our system? And defensively, we can spend all this money on this edge rusher or this corner, but is he right for us? Because you can get the best players in the world. If they're not right for your culture and they don't align with your system, it's not going to work. That's what happened with FSU last year. They had a bunch of good players. They didn't mesh. It didn't work. And they won 2 games. So even though he's not going to have that same level of investment as these schools that are at the top of the Big 12 right now, if it's managed correctly and Klein is able to have that building aligned where they know what they want to do and they know how to execute it, there's a world where that disparity in investment almost doesn't matter.
So, the final question before to move off this topic is, how long does Klein stay for? Because on one hand, it's going home. He is a unique coach. This is a guy who plays several instruments. He is a guy you look at and realize like he's not just a hammerhead football player. He grew up in Kansas State. He coached and played under Bill Snyder. So could you see him staying there for several years? Or if you're Kansas State, do you even have to? I mean, his grandfather is a barber in Estes Park, Colorado. His brother was a wide receiver for Kansas State. Does that mean anything? Do you think he'll stay there for several years, or is this one of those guys you also look and go 2 or 3 years? He has success, and which SEC team or ACC team or even Big Ten team is going to come a knock and going, "Hey, here's a boatload of money. We'd love for you to come."
There's always that threat of, someone just buying the guy off you and poaching him. But, being a former player at Kansas State, having all these ties to the school, it definitely helps your chances of keeping him a lot. Because, Brent Key and Jeff Brom, they were offered a crap ton of money to move on this cycle. So was Clark Lee at Vanderbilt. But those are all guys who bleed their school's colors and they're staying. So you've already seen that this cycle with coaches who are at jobs that are, I don't want to say, stepping stones, but they're definitely not the quality of job as some of the other schools that were offering those guys, but they stuck because they love that school. And with Collin Klein, I think you could easily see that to where, this is home. And as long as they're having good enough success, but really the biggest thing is he getting that investment and that alignment from the school? I do think you could see Klein stick around for a while, even though despite potential outside interest.
Wow. Went from some professionalism to no professionalism. Notre Dame. Yes, basically, it's like a little kid. You didn't get your way. Well, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. They did not get into the college football playoff, which we'll talk about later on the next couple of weeks, because that thing's going to be just an obsessive topic, which we could go into like a 3 hour show about. But Notre Dame decided, yeah, well, we didn't get invited. You screwed us. They're now upset with the ACC, the playoff committee. They just decided, nope, we're not going to a bowl game at all. We took our name out of here. What the hell is going on at Notre Dame? And I know you've been throwing both barrels of your cannons and fireballs at them. So here's the floor. What the hell is going on at Notre Dame? And as you call them, how big of a baby are they?
Yeah, this is one of the softest things I've ever seen in my entire life. Like Notre Dame, I mean, to their credit, for good reason, they have always been, they felt like they're near the top of the sport because they're one of the biggest brands in the sport, no doubt. They've been able to maintain their independence and stay relevant. This is one of the weakest things that I've ever seen because what message are you sending to your fans, I mean, I don't know how the decision was made to skip out of the bowl game. I don't know if it was a player vote. I don't know if it was just the administration, but I have a hard time believing that all of the players were in a consensus of we don't want to play any more football because there are seniors on that team who have no NFL future. And now they're fans. They are not going to see Jeremiah Love play for their team ever again. And like as a fan, that can be devastating because like when I was, 8 or 9 years old, I'm a Florida fan. I'm looking at these Gator guys like Tim Tebow, Percy Harvin, just like all these guys, they're superheroes to me. And if I was in this spot as a little kid to where all of a sudden, like, yeah, we're not going to play anymore because we didn't get our way, I'd be heartbroken because then I lose a chance to see these players who I love playing football. I don't get to watch them play anymore. So it's a slap in the face to your fans. It's a slap in the face to the sport because this whole holier than thou thing that they're doing is ridiculous. You're not above the sport. And just because you're independent and you have pride in that, that doesn't mean that the sport bends to your will. If you want to get out of this, join a conference and win a conference because they can be pissy all they want. Win your games, win the football games because sure, their AD went out and said, yeah, we were on the most dominant 10-game run of all time. First off, that's a load of shit. And second of all, the season is 12 games long. You want to be in the playoff? How about you beat the playoff teams that you played against? You lost to Miami. You lost to A&M. Those are the spots that's where that was taken from you when you lost your football games. So don't when your whole argument after the fact is just wah wah wah, no one's going to take you seriously. It is the softest thing I can really remember seeing in this sport. It's a slap in the face to the integrity of the game. It's a slap in the face to your fans. And frankly, in my opinion, it's a slap in the face to a good chunk of your players who love playing football and now don't have the opportunity to play potentially the last organized football game of their lives.
There is a trend I've noticed, and now it's there. As I know, defenders will say, "Well, other teams pulled out, like Iowa State, Kansas State, Baylor, UCF, Auburn, Rutgers, Temple, Kansas, all opted out from playing a bowl game." Uh, Iowa State and Kansas State at least had good excuses. Hey, we just lost our coaches. We're losing our
Mhm.
players. We're not sure if we're going to be around. Of course, they got fined $500,000 in the Big 12. Once again, that's a different story, a different day. How much is Notre Dame just look and go, well, what are you going to do to us? Nothing. I mean, the AC, I mean, they've also, came out against the ACC, almost daring them to like apologize because either or we'll leave. At what point, if you are the ACC or if you're college football playoff, and I guess there's now supposedly if they finish in the top 12 next year, they're automatically in, so they're rewarding bad behavior. But what does college football do? I mean, if you're the ACC and if you're the college football playoff, I mean, is there any way you could punish him and sort of put Notre Dame in their place and go, hey, look, you're not bigger than all of us, so get off your britches, stop whining, put the pacifier back in your mouth, and grow up like the rest of us.
Yeah, my biggest question is why does college football need Notre Dame as they currently are? Like, yeah, they're a big brand. They have a tradition of talent. They don't need them. Notre Dame was great before games were televised. Awesome. And now they've been relevant. That doesn't make them bigger than the sport. So if you're some of these other power conferences and power schools, why would you schedule these guys? Let them keep playing nobodies and thinking they're better than everybody else. Like the sport doesn't need Notre Dame. They don't. There are tons of big programs and there's so much money. And yeah, Notre Dame is obviously a big revenue aspect of it. I'm not denying that. They're not the only one, and they're probably not the biggest one. So I don't think that the sport needs Notre Dame as they currently are. So all you have to do if you're the rest of the teams is say, we're not putting up with it. Because I mean, imagine the bubble team next year, if things stay the same as they are right now, who, let's say it was Bama this year, but like let's say they lost the conference championship, it was only their second loss. So it was more of an argument, right? Let's say they get left out and punished for being 11-1 in the regular season and losing in Atlanta, all because Notre Dame sat at home as the ninth ranked team in the country. It's just you have Notre Dame thinking they're better than everybody else, poisoning the rest of the sport. Like college football does not need Notre Dame as they currently are. So send a message and say you are not bigger than the sport. You're either going to adapt to how the sport is right now, or we'll leave you alone. Because we have tons of other big schools who are doing what they have to do in their conferences. They're doing what they have to do in those conference championships. They're abiding by the rules of the sport, and you're not above that. So there has to be a certain degree of, I think, certain other schools like stop scheduling Notre Dame, stop putting them on these platforms to where they can even play these bigger schools and have their logo against other big teams. Leave them because they think that they're better than you. So why would you even give them any gratification of being on the same field as you? That's kind of where I'm at with it.
How much does it hurt because that Notre Dame has their own TV deal? Like in a conference where, like, as we said, ACC's trying to get a better deal, Big 12's trying to get a better deal. SEC and Big Ten, they have great deals, but when everybody's trying to get on television, how much does it hurt trying to force this when Notre Dame is locked into 2029? They are locked into a TV contract that pays them a lot of money. So again, I would love the ACC and some of these teams to go pound sand, but when they have their own TV deal, how much is it tough to enforce it when they can go, all right, we'll take our ball and go home. We're still getting paid. We still are a brand name, for a culture here which brand recognition still goes far. Like, how much does it help for Notre Dame that they have a TV deal and you can name drop Notre Dame? People go, oh, I know that place.
It does help them a little bit, for sure. But, if you're ESPN or Fox, like obviously, Fox will have some and ESPN has them for bowl games. But like how much Like, just let NBC keep showing Notre Dame versus Northern Illinois all year. Keep letting them have what they think is the class of the sport with Notre Dame playing a bunch of nobodies. Like, the TV deals do obviously matter, and there's a ton of money involved. But with how much money there is involved, like, you can take one hit right now, knowing that honestly, if the playoff keeps expanding, you're going to make up that money next year when you have, if you're the SEC, a seventh team in the playoff. Like, if the sport keeps bending the knee to a team that plays a bunch of crappy teams on NBC every Saturday night, like, nothing's going to change. And you're going to keep seeing their AD, making his own press conference because of how important he is, and then throwing a hissy fit for 2 hours. Like, that is not, it's not what the sport's about. The sport's about playing teams and earning your way into the playoff. And Notre Dame has not been doing that. They've been losing their games against good teams and then complaining about not being included. And at a certain point, you know, this I do think will be the straw that breaks the camel's back for a lot of people. Because Notre Dame is still a respectable brand, that's fine, but they've sort of been slowly turning into this, like, we're better than you, we're independent, we only do what you say for a few years. If things go sour on them, I think you could see change happen.
Speaking of change, well, 2025 Heisman Trophy finalists are here, and there's been a change in the betting favorite. It used to be for a while it was, hey, Fernando Mendoza, and now Diego Pavia is becoming the favorite to win the Heisman Award winner. Look, I've had people from Dom C, Anthony Russo from the Draft Professors podcast. There's even other guys who are like, why is Diego in there? He does not belong. One of these things doesn't go with the others, and people are saying it's Diego Pavia. But why is he there? He's not as good. So, as the captain and president of a Diego Pavia Heisman winner fan club, the floor is yours. Well, why is it that you believe and you are telling people Diego Pavia deserves the Heisman?
Yeah, first off, it is incredibly cool that you're seeing this come down effectively to a quarterback at Vandy and Indiana. Right, like these are two schools who don't really sniff Heisman talk, and now they're both in here. But if you're looking at Pavia, right, this is a guy who, I mean, if for the whole stars don't matter crowd, he wasn't ranked as a recruit. He started off in JUCO. Then he went to New Mexico State. And then he shows up at Vanderbilt and he's talking all this confidence. He's being arrogant. And people are like, dude, what are you talking about? And then he balls the hell out. I mean, he has almost 200 more passing yards than Mendoza this year. He has played one less game. He has 600 more rushing yards. Excuse me. He's played one less game. This guy is a winner. He has played less football than Mendoza this year, and he's blowing him out of the water when it comes to these numbers. And Mendoza's stats, look, you could say this a bit for Pavia too, playing weak teams. A ton of Mendoza's yards and touchdowns have come against teams like Indiana State and Kennesaw State. And then you go into the conference play, right? You're playing teams like Maryland. You're playing teams like, Purdue. Diego's doing this shit against LSU, Missouri, Texas, Alabama. Like, the caliber of opponent that Pavia is playing, people want to scream SEC bias at me. Guys, it's bias is a different thing. When teams are just better than other teams, that's what this is. The SEC's middle pack is playing a different sport than the Big Ten's middle pack. So you look at the games against like equally seeded teams, within each conferences, the A seed in the SEC would blow the A seed in the Big Ten out of the water. And that's who Pavia is putting up better numbers against. Texas's defense, one of the best in the country, he threw for 365 on him. Bama, 198, but he ran for a ton of that game. LSU, like he does this, he does it in many different ways. If he can't pass the ball around, he's going to run it right through you. He makes throws on the run, off balance, that human beings don't normally do. And this guy is just a 6-foot kid from Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is what the Heisman Trophy is about. It's about giving the award to guys who nobody would know until they got on the big stage and then they dominated. And for Vanderbilt, you don't want to put them in the playoff as a 10-2 SEC team who have only lost on the road to Bama and on the road to Texas with a Heisman frontrunner. That's fine. But this Vanderbilt team, they deserve way more than they're currently getting. And it starts with Pavia getting the Heisman because despite being at a school like Vanderbilt, despite playing one of the hardest schedules in the country, and despite being this underdog his whole life, he is putting up the best numbers in the sport. And he's played one less game than Fernando, and the numbers still aren't even that close. And Pavia was the favorite before that Big Ten championship game. Then all of a sudden, Mendoza gets the favorite because he completed one deep ball late in the game where he only scored 13 points. I mean, give me a break. He couldn't get his team to 14 points in that game. I understand Ohio State's defense is good, but you want to have a Heisman moment, put up 24 on them. Have an efficient offensive attack to where you're throwing for more than 220 in that game. Like what Pavia has done this year is he's transformed a Vanderbilt team into a national contender. He brought him into Neyland and he dominated Tennessee. That's thing this school doesn't do. And yes, you can say a similar thing about Mendoza doing it with Indiana, who hadn't been relevant for the past 2 years either. But the quality of opponent is right in front of you. Pavia is doing this against better teams with less games to do it, and he's doing a better job of it. That's really all it boils down to me.
I guess like here's what the Mendoza crowd will combat at. That when he's needed to, he's Mendoza has won games where you can look and go, shouldn't have won that game. Oregon. Oregon had come off of, mauling Penn State. They were, everybody thought at the time they were the number two team, maybe even the best team. He goes into Eugene, Oregon, puts up 30 on that defense, takes some big hits, which, look, Oregon can crack you. And he won that game. The Penn State game, they are down. That team is not playing well. And basically a last, 2-minute drive, he wins with almost no time left, touchdown in the end zone. Again, that's one of those caps. And yes, I know they only threw 13, blah blah blah. It's,
Mm.
I mean, look, Ohio. I mean, we saw Vandy get lit up like a Christmas tree against Texas, and then we saw that same Texas team get basically bitch slapped around. Arch Manning had nightmares by Ohio State, and they make everybody look bad. So again, if I guess my argument with Mendoza against Pavia is he's been the best player and the best team. He's won the games that they shouldn't have won. I love Pavia, but you can
Mm.
argue, well, they didn't get over the hump with Alabama. They didn't get over the hump with Texas. Mendoza, they got over the hump, and now all of a sudden we're talking, dare I say, Indiana as the number one seed in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, it's fair. Yeah, I don't want to take away from what Mendoza is doing. He's having one of the best seasons that anyone can really remember, and he is doing it at Indiana. Like Mendoza, really, in my opinion, any other year, this is Mendoza's award running away. But in terms of winning games that you shouldn't and being able to take hits, if you just watch what Pavia was doing, like without knowing he was the quarterback, you would think this guy's playing middle linebacker. He is running through people. He's lead blocking on like most run plays. Like he will throw the ball to Stowers and then sprint downfield and try and decapitate the safety. That's a football player. And winning games you shouldn't win. Vanderbilt should never win 10 games in a season. And then they did. I mean, ripping off wins over LSU, Missouri, Auburn, and Tennessee. That's not what Vanderbilt does. So with that argument for Mendoza, right, about winning games they shouldn't win and getting up after taking hits, that's also true for Pavia. And because of SEC versus Big Ten, I put more stock in what Pavia's done. And like I said before, Mendoza, any other year, he's my Heisman too. I just think that what you've seen Pavia do, it impresses me more. The numbers are greater with one less game. His schedule is harder. That's why, in my mind, this goes to Diego.
So again, who wins it? Because that's going to be a tough question. Because I'll argue that the guy who should be on here is not on there. That's Texas Tech linebacker
Yeah.
Jacob Rodriguez, who all of a sudden now everybody wants him on their team. He's become the darling of college football. He's just this lovable linebacker with a military chopper pilot wife, and he is all over the place. He is basically what Manti Te'o was, except a little bit bigger and has a mustache.
Hmm.
And he's not in there. So again, I mean, how much should there be a worry if you were a Pavia fan that Mendoza looks the part? He's going to be probably the number one pick of the NFL draft. Julian's saying, hey, this is going to be the next great, Ohio State quarterback. Probably all of a sudden now we're talking to him 2028 as maybe the number one pick. And Jeremiah Love is going to be is I'm hearing now top 10. So again, Does it hurt Pavia that most people are going to say, well, he wasn't the best player? He is, you put all these guys and they are head and shoulders better than Pavia as a college football slash NFL player.
Well, that's the question then. Is the Heisman Award based off pro potential, or is it based off what you're doing in college? Because in my mind, the Heisman Trophy should go to the best college player of the season. And that's Pavia. You look at the numbers, look at what he's doing against better teams, that's who it is. Look, and I fully agree though that Pavia probably does not have an NFL future, and Mendoza definitely does. But that's not what the award is for. The award is not for what we think you're going to get drafted at. The award is not what we think you're going to do in the NFL. The award is most outstanding player in college football. Hard stop. So it's got to be Diego. And look, if you ask me right now, who do I think is going to get it? I think Mendoza's going to get it. But I think it should be Pavia because of everything I've been yelling about for the past 10 minutes. I won't go through it again. Objectively, if you made me pick, I would pick Mendoza to win it. But that is because of what the award has become, which is like you said, who's going to be the best NFL player? Which guy won their conference? That's Mendoza. So I think the factors that in this day and age are being put into the Heisman, that goes Mendoza's way, which is probably why he'll end up getting it. But what the award is supposed to represent is everything that Diego Pavia is.
Before we let you go, what are the odds that he does win it, though? Because we look at here, it's Mendoza, Sayin, Love, they're all from the Midwest, so they're going to split the vote. You had to
Mhm.
figure every SEC voter is going to look and go, hey, Diego Pavia is our guy. We're voting for him. So if Pavia wins, how much should we expect? An SEC, oh, it's the SEC screwing everybody again. God damn those a-holes. That Will Thomas, he stuffed the ballot box. Hey, we want to recount. Recount.
There's definitely that chance. I think your point is perfect about how all those Midwest guys kind of stacking votes, and I think you could even look at Jeremiah Love. Maybe he gets a vote because people feel bad for Notre Dame. So there is definitely that element of, what do voters like? Where is their sentiment? Yeah, and I don't believe that their sentiment is truly who had the most outstanding year in college football. I don't think that's what this is being voted off of, which is why I think it ends up going to Mendoza. But there's definitely that argument of, does every voter in the South go for Pavia because he's kind of their guy? Does every, big sort of suit who has a vote go with Mendoza because the number one seed won the Big Ten, all that? Like, you are going to see those sort of groups of voters probably go with certain guys, which is going to, skew the data a little bit. But I do still think it ends up with Mendoza, but it should be Diego. But your point about, certain voters, whether it's splitting votes or just certain voters in a certain demographic voting for somebody else, is definitely accurate.
Well, very heavily, John. Once again, we always love having him on the show because he brings the heat and he's not afraid to tell you what he feels, what is in his mind right, and call out some bad behavior from college football teams, players, and administrators. I give you once again from Tailgate Talk SEC. I give you Will Thomas. So, Will, before we let you go, where can fans check you out again? Where is the YouTube channel, the Twitter, uh, X, Instagram, Rumble channel? Where can fans hit you up at?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at W Thomas Sports and then Tailgate Talk SEC on YouTube, podcast, and everywhere else.
Will Thomas, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always on a pleasure to have you on the show. We come back. We got a lot more going on here, only on It's Last Call. Last Call with the alcohol, only on the Last Call Podcast.com.